A story that is all too common among many young men today is how promiscuous women are. It seems to be the topic for discussion, especially among many red pill content creators, individuals who say, I'm not about that blue pill life and holding hands and relationships and family life, etc. And they often talk about how, being a high value man, earning, specific amount of income that would consider you a high value man, and of course, sleeping around with women. And at the same time, of course, the big topic for discussion is always about how women are, in essence, sleeping around, very similar to men. Well, women can't do it, but we can do it because we're high value for X, Y, and Z reasons. And it just goes to show you, and I've said this all the time, and the Bible has the exact same justification when it talks about how there will be time periods where there will literally be no righteous men in the world. And as a result, you might come across, it says, you might come across one out of 1,000, out of 1,000, and 0 out of 1,000 in terms of women, showing that women typically will imitate the level of justice or the high standards that a man keeps. Which is why in most conquering nations, if the women were, for example, Jewish and a bunch of Muslim men rode in and took over the nation, well, then the women would convert, right? By nature, the women would convert because they're not going to go out there and start fighting and shouldering their rifle or raise up a revolution because they can't. They physically don't have the strength. And so women typically, which most red pill content creators will agree, that women conform to the environment that you put them in. And so I just want you to listen to this clip right here real quick, and then we're going to discuss.
Listen, I have a million stories, once again, about girls who have boyfriends, but yet come home with me.
Tell us one. Tell us one, man. Come on.
Tell us
one,
you can't
say that. You gotta tell us one.
You know what? I got you guys.
Good.
Okay. One time I was booked out of town. I won't say where. And I had an Airbnb, a nice big house, pool, all that decked out. And I had a girl book a shoot. Okay, cool. While I'm out there, so she booked.
Was
a
it in
shoot
the
while
state
I
of
was there.
Florida? Okay, all right. Okay, all right, Travis. All right.
Yes, it was in
Straight
Florida.
up. Okay.
So as you can see, typically this is what a lot of men, maybe who don't get a lot of women in their lives, this is typically what excites them. And especially for individuals who maybe aren't as good as women, or maybe they have like a new perspective, the new age perspective on how to gain women. And this is kind of what excites them, the thrill of getting a new thought. And basically, we're not going to go through his whole experience, but this is a good example of how delusional men are. They will sit here and point to women and say women are trash, or women are X, Y, and Z, and women are thoughts, and women are whores, and women are sluts, etc. They will use all of this sort of shaming women in regards to the activities that they do in this experience. And he talks about some other ones where he does like Instagram booty pictures, right? That's what he does. So he's a photographer for women who want to do like sexy booty pictures on Instagram. And so obviously, to no surprise, this woman ends up offering him oral sex. And of course, like the simp that he is, of course he accepts it. Why? Because this is typically what low value men do. This is what they want to imagine what a high value man would do. Exactly, basically to use this other individual. And of course, her boyfriend is waiting downstairs. Now, women will do this regardless, because women will typically take on the morals of the men that they are around. That just happens by nature. Men are much more ingrained with the ability to use logic and reason and then come up with, in essence, a moral code that they will follow. That's why men typically are less violent around other men, because they realize that at the end of the day, it will get physical if we cannot use our logic and reason to be able to deduce with some sort of a conclusion. Women are not like that. Women are much quicker to jump into violence, which is why when you look at female police altercations, women typically shoot much earlier than a male police officer would. Which is why when you look at, for example, lesbian relationships or bisexual relationships with women, they are typically much more likely to have domestic violence. And I'll show the statistics so that you can see that is because the women will typically are much more inclined to use violence than men typically are. And so that's why it's important, if you want to be someone who is deemed high value, that you actually have moral code. Living your lifestyle like this, where you imagine and you kind of like giggle like a little schoolgirl that you slept with another man's girlfriend, and that somehow is viewed by today's society as okay for men to do, but if women do it, well, then that's not right. The irony is that many of these men have very much the same talking points that women do. Women go out and women will sleep around, and then eventually they'll look for a high value man that they want to settle down with. And then men will do the exact same thing. They'll go around, they'll sleep around with all these different women that they view as sluts or whores, etc. Whatever sort of label that you want to utilize, that many of these men utilize, and they'll say their thoughts, etc. But then they'll go and these aren't the women that they want to marry. They want to marry the traditional sort of woman, while all throughout their younger years, while they're building value, they will go off and sleep around with all these women who will just give up of themselves naturally to basically the highest bidder, whoever they can get the best experience from or make them feel a certain way. And this is why I say, as much as these men want to point to women and talk about women's delusions and that women are irrational, etc., these men are the exact same thing. And that's why I said women and men, they're just mirror images of the same, just women reflect men. If men are high value, if men have a high moral standard, then women will be held to that, will be held accountable. Why is it that women today are not held accountable? It's because realistically speaking, the men don't want to hold them accountable. When you look back at history, men, when women were like, we want to go out there and we want to sleep around, men were like, shit, you're telling me I can sleep around you, we can sleep around, I can sleep with you, and now I don't have to provide for you? Now I don't have to go out there and build a house and risk my life, and I can get everything that I wanted. I can have a kid out of wedlock, right? I can sleep around with multiple women out of wedlock. I can have a relationship and maybe sleep around or just not get involved, and I get all the benefits like they used. Like back in the day, fathers and mothers used to say, well, why would he buy the cow when he can get the milk for free? And that was a really easy illustration for many young women and for men that men understood. Why would men go out there and create and build for women when you're literally giving them all the benefits for free? It was a very easy illustration for many individuals to understand, and for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, modern relationship people who were getting in a relationship understood that, which is why patriarchy had existed for so long, is because people understood how the dynamics between relationships worked and how society fared better. And so what you see here in America is the complete breakdown of patriarchy and basically turning more into a matriarchal sort of society, especially within groups of color, which is why you see such high prevalence of violence. Perfect example is what recently happened with that young girl in the midst of stabbing someone, and then she gets shot, and then everybody becomes emotional. Hey, why'd you shoot her? You should have shot her in the leg. You should have shot her in the arm. You should have wrestled her down, whatever, for the police to do. And it's because the white male police officers, and most men think logically, they don't think emotionally. They see where someone is about to lose their life or be violently maimed, and they will take action to stop the threat. And then everybody else in that neighborhood, it becomes emotional. Instead of saying, well, she had a knife, she was about to stab that other girl, and so the officer did what was necessary to put down the threat. Or some people were like, she's 16 years old. What the hell is she doing with a knife in her hand about to stab someone? That should go to the mental disposition of the person who was about to stab the other individual. Then you look in that video where you see the man who apparently was the father literally stomping on the head of the other young girl who was involved in that little bit of an altercation. And this is what this whole mindset breeds. It just ends up in violence. And that's why you see so much violence within these communities. And it all stems from the mindset of low value and the perpetuation of fornication and adultery within minorities, primarily people of color, who are more impoverished and typically as a result are on the darker end of the spectrum. And you see this in country after country after country, where when you look into these countries, if you had the opportunity to travel, that's why do you think men typically like this? They love going to the DR, to places like Sausua, which is an area of prostitution where women go out and they prostitute themselves. It is a very violent and dangerous area with very high crime. For example, when I went to Colombia, and I've been to Colombia many times, you go to Medellin. These are the type of men that you will come across. Overwhelmingly older white men, younger black men that typically go to places like Medellin. Why? Because there's a lot of prostitution that goes on in these areas. And so the locals despise these men. That's why you see racism. When you go to Colombia, you will see, even among the lighter skinned Hispanics, they're racist against blacks. Just like for example, in the DR, where you have very dark skinned people, they don't like the Haitians because of what goes on in those communities. And then they come into the Dominican Republic, and then you end up with crime. You go to places, for example, like Cartagena. In places like Cartagena, you see very similar things. And this is what typically what they go to. The men go there. They go there with their money, with their dollars, and they basically perpetuate fornication, adultery, and prostitution. And then men look around like, oh, I can't understand why the women are the way they are. What's going on here? These women are crazy these days. Well, let's blame it on social media. Let's blame it on Instagram. Let's blame it on Facebook. Let's blame it on YouTube. Whatever it is, all this bullshit that they want to come up with. Because men don't want to take responsibility. As much as men sit here and they point to women being unaccountable, women aren't accountable because you don't want to hold them accountable. Because you don't want to be accountable for your own action. That's just the reality.